Dumelang, Sanbonani, as we're heading towards the 29th of May, the biggest election in South Africa, we have new parties, newcomers. Most of you know Hemed Mashaba, the former Johannesburg mayor, also a businessman who owns Black Like Me brand, and he has joined politics as of recent, coming with a new party, ActionSA. In studio today, I have a youth voice, Ismail Joosub. Ismail is a leader of Mpumalanga, a very youth voice. He holds a degree in law. He's also pursuing an international law LLM. And not only that, Ismail is on the highest number towards the seat in parliament. Ismail Dumela, how are you, my brother?
Bafana, what an honor. What a privilege it is to be in studio here with you today. I am the youth chairperson for Mpumalanga and not the absolute highest member on the list, but certainly the highest youth member on ActionSA's list, yeah.
Definitely. Yusuf, looking at the ActionSA, most people still view it as a new party coming into the space of politics, not necessarily led by politicians per se. Giving us a background on, first you, as someone who started in varsity, was politics your space of interest all along?
Right, so I want to touch on that. ActionSA is a new party. You're right. We were formed in 2020, and we had our genesis in something called the People's Dialogue.
Yes.
And so, therefore, I agree with what you say. We're not a party that's made up of bureaucrats, specifically just career politicians or cadres. We have a whole host of experts guiding us in our policies. So let's touch on me. Not that I'm including myself in that panel of experts.
We wanted to know more about you.
Who is Ismail? Ismail Joosub is a third-generation Indian South African.
Yes.
I hail from a very small town in Mpumalanga, Ermelo. And I always grew up wanting to make a difference in society. I found my niche in law. Because law is one of those fields where you interact with so many different branches of society. You're interacting with politics, you're interacting with business. Most importantly, you have a good perspective of what's going on around you, what your position is in the world, how to really make a difference, right? I think also, if I may say, law is something that comes natural to me, being related to the first Black Chief Justice of South Africa, Justice Ismail Mohammed, a namesake. And growing up, I think what really caused me, what really spurred me rather, to enter the legal field was that I looked around and I saw the injustice, really, occurring in South Africa. I saw South Africans have their human rights violated. I can name a whole host of human rights. Our forefathers fought their entire lives for equality. We still don't have equality. We still don't have a non-racial society. And non-racialism is a core tenet of ActionSA.
So you would say that one thing that brought you into the space of politics was the injustice that you saw.
Yeah.
And you, in that space, you thought that being a lawyer, you would be able to be at the forefront of changing the realities of our people.
Absolutely. I thought that going into the legal space, I'd be able to represent those people who've had their rights tarnished.
Yes.
So I pursued an LLB degree at the University of Pretoria, and I hailed as one of the best students there. Then, after graduating, I found out that, well, I still have a thirst for knowledge. And I looked at South Africa and I said, well, the problems to South Africa are not endemic just to South Africa. There's problems happening everywhere in the world. And so I decided to pursue an LLM, a master's degree in international law, because I wanted to understand what causes these deep-seated problems, and is it just South Africa that's enduring these problems? And I discovered the root of the problem, the government. And that's why I've joined ActionSA, to put an end to the problems, the political problems, but really problems that affect every single South African in South Africa. I've also been a part of numerous youth-led initiatives, where I've been chairperson of numerous commissions.
I know you're part of the FWD Clerk as one, and Thabo Mbeki.
Absolutely. I entered civil society, engaging with the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, working as a legal officer at the FW de Klerk Foundation in their constitutional program. I analyzed legislation in Parliament and attacked that from a human rights perspective, compared compare the legislation that Parliament is promulgating in terms of the Bill of Rights. Does it hold up to the constitutional standards? That's what I do.
As a young person, you get to a point where you want to join politics now. You want to stand up, and you found ActionSA as a better party. Why ActionSA? Why not any other party that was available at the time?
Yeah. So, Bafana, I found ActionSA not to be a better party, but in my opinion, I found ActionSA to be the single best party. And there's two reasons for this, really. The one is, I liked your introduction where you mentioned Herman Mashaba. Herman Mashaba has a brilliant track record of being, in my opinion, the best mayor of Johannesburg this city has ever had. In the short span of time that he served his tenure, he's done more for Joburg than the coalition government in Joburg has done in the last 5 years, since 2019 when Herman stepped down. And so I looked at Herman as a role model. What he's done in business, from humble beginnings, the success he's built in that field, and humble as a person to then take his business interests, put that aside, go into politics for the good of the nation. It inspired me. The other thing is, ActionSA has been a home to me. It's been a home in the sense that it works towards the building of a more perfect union. We've come together, this cohort of us, as young leaders, as more experienced leaders, as leaders from other parties, and we have united in our efforts to bring about a better South Africa.
Joosub, as an individual, as a young person in this country, outside of the ActionSA, what would you say is the core issue in this country? What is the main problem that you're looking to fix through ActionSA?
If I'm to be honest with you, which I hope I am, the ANC government is the problem. Because there's not one single problem wrong with South Africa. The rot has festered throughout this country. We have unemployment rates that are amidst the highest in the world. We have the most unequal society in the world. We have crime rates that are just rampant. We have children who are unable to read for meaning, causing a whole host of problems in the educational space.
Yes.
We can't even keep the lights on. Our water is not up to standard.
Yeah.
We have cater deployment that festers in every level of society. We have a government that I think ranks amongst the most corrupt in the world. And we're not where we should be as a country on the international stage.
So speaking on those issues, that means then you are engaged, that's corruption. And there was a part where you spoke on a news channel where you spoke about having a special corruption combating court.
Yes.
Where you can be able to expedite those corruption charges brought forth to politicians, because ever since the Zondo Commission, we haven't seen much action being taken. And a lot of monies went into that commission, but we have not seen the results of that. So, and also Herman spoke on those issues of corruption. Will that be a priority position?
Absolutely. Corruption is going to be the number one thing that we tackle in getting into government. Now remember, getting into government doesn't mean that we dethrone rather the ANC and the ANC falls into the shadows. We've got to tackle corruption, as I say, in every sector of society. Going back to the ANC, our Shadow Minister of Justice, Advocate Julie Seaton, released a list of the top 10 most wanted politicians in South Africa who are presumed to be very corrupt.
Yeah.
And to tackle that, in our manifesto, what we've said is we've got to bring back more stringent regulations dealing with corruption. Bring back the Scorpions, you have the Hawks, you have the NPA, more incentivized and more better resource to deal with corruption. Specialized crime courts, specialized corruption courts is something that I advocated for. You'll have corruption courts, as you say, that are tasked with expediting corruption cases. Corruption cases will be handled on a very serious basis because, as I say, if you tackle corruption, you set an example for the rest of the country. If you have a disciplined, ethical cohort of leaders in government, then you have a society that it itself is disciplined.
So I'm going to go straight into the youth of this country, who today, as you spoke earlier, 60% of them are unemployed. Most of them are living on what you call 350s, and some are on social grants. How do we then create jobs for these young people under ActionSA?
Yeah, so this is a great question. And, Bafana, here's the thing, right, is it's such a shame that the president of the country, in his State of the Nation address, brags about 18 million people being on social grants. That's not a good thing. When you have a third of your population asking for money from the government, thinking that they're entitled to something from the government, then you don't have a good situation in your country. Unemployment is at the heart of that.
Yeah.
Especially youth unemployment.
Yes.
So here's how we tackle that. Firstly, labor laws are too stringent. You've got to relax labor laws, yet still protect workers from being exploited.
Yeah.
You've got to cut red tape. So you can advocate for a minimum wage, which should be there, but it should be relaxed. What you also have to do is make sure that you have legislation in Parliament that's not restricting people from getting access to jobs. So affirmative action, the Employment Equity Act, what this does by setting rigid quotas for certain racial groups to have access to certain jobs, it's not only discriminatory, but what it does is it tells certain people that on the basis of race, you're not entitled to a certain job.
Somebody else will argue that that is mainly because the majority of the people in this country are black and they're the most impoverished. Meanwhile, the minorities, which are your community, the African, the white community, they seem to be a little bit better off.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why we are there taking a position that seems to kind of have affirmative action to take the majority of black people out of poverty. Would you share the same sentiment?
You know, this is why I say, Bafana, that ActionSA is the single best party, because ActionSA doesn't trot its line on this. We do believe that there is a serious correlation between people who are previously disadvantaged and the current socioeconomic status on the ground today.
Okay.
But we believe, again, that the government is at the heart of what's making previously disadvantaged people still disadvantaged. In 30 years of so-called democracy, if the government hasn't been able to rectify the problems of the past, if the report card isn't showing distinctions in your 30th year of democracy, then I don't think you've done a good job. So, to answer your question, BEE is the government's way of dealing with the question of people who are previously disadvantaged.
Yes.
We have a better solution. We have a better proposal found in our manifesto. We don't call it BEE, we call it IEE, Inclusive Economic Empowerment.
Yes.
Inclusive is something that you'll find all throughout ActionSA's policies because we, as I mentioned, are a party that at its heart is non-racial. Is a party of equality. How do we go about doing this? You see, the problem is that in BEE, you have the government symbolically raising the status of a handful of previously disadvantaged people, in this instance, black people, who they tout as being successful. But if you go to the average black, Indian, colored person on the street, they haven't benefited from BEE. And why? Because any money that's supposed to be in BEE is squandered by the government. What we propose as ActionSA with IEE is that you have a separate vehicle to deal with people who are previously disadvantaged, bringing them up to the level of society where you'd want them to be. We call for the creation of an independent opportunity fund. The opportunity fund is essentially a fund that's going to be taxed by a tax levy from the corporate sector at 5%. It's going to hold 56 billion rands worth of money therein. You're going to have a breakdown of what that money is being used for. On its board will be private sector individuals or independent government representatives, making sure that that money is utilized where it should be. Then you have proper disbursement of funds. Then you have people who are actually previously disadvantaged, who actually need funds, who actually need to be financed in some way or helped out or assisted or aided by the government, being done in a more proper way.
Ismail, the problem that we have, and you said something about not being a welfare state or not necessarily having a president who celebrates people being on welfare, but you are also promising a 750 UBIS, Universal Basic Income. So aren't you doing the same thing that the president is doing?
Absolutely not.
How?
ActionSA doesn't beat around the bush. Ideally, in a society, you wouldn't want a population who goes asking for money from the government or who is entitled to or thinks they're entitled to certain handouts from the government. So you'd want people who are self-sufficient, right? And we are quite clear as well that we're not going to scrap social grants, but if it could be essentially, ideally in the future, phased out because people have been brought to a level where they should be, then that would be great. And to do that, you have to give people what their dignity demands.
Yes.
And that's why we come up with a proposal called the Universal Basic Income Stimulus. And it's divided into different tiers. 700 and something rands will be dispersed per month.
For everyone.
For everyone, up to 1,000 and something rands per month for every South African. Why? What's the idea behind this?
Yes.
Not to create a welfare state, but to encourage economic growth. We believe this will really light a fire in the economy that will spur the economy into where it should be. Because when people have money in their pockets, they become consumers.
Spend. Yes, yes.
And because of that, because they're consumers, because they are empowered now, they're able to do things that they previously couldn't do.
There've been different programs that were built up for youth empowerment. I'm sure you know about the NYDA and different projects that came as a result of that. Would you be pursuing a similar approach in terms of upscaling? I know Hammond is a businessman, he's an entrepreneur. Yes. Would you be looking to improve NYDA to be more efficient, or would you still have a new plan to address skills development and building up entrepreneurship in the country?
Absolutely. Look, Bafana, the thing is, the ANC has policies that may theoretically be decent, but the problem is that it's not, you don't see that in society. It's not executed well, right? And that's because of the corruption I spoke about earlier. And so this opportunity fund will host the NYDA. In other words, it will host the functions of the NYDA focused on youth initiatives. And remember, I said the Opportunity Fund will be broken up into different components where certain amounts of money will be dispersed for certain things. Of that, a large chunk will be given out for infrastructure development. Of that, a large chunk will be given out for making this Opportunity Fund more sustainable and altogether creating a situation where youth are empowered, not through an NYDA that may be susceptible to corruption, but through an independent opportunity fund.
Because most young people have a view that politicians tend to make these promises. I'm sure now you know about the new Nancy Spani projects where young people have been rallied to go and apply for jobs. And even over this weekend, there was a program of that sort, and there's still complaints around that. Do you think the state in its right now in its form is unable to literally provide solutions to the current issues?
Absolutely. If the state could provide solutions to everyone's problems, why hasn't it? Why are there still problems? If there's solutions, surely there shouldn't be any problems. And this is a large reason why we believe, not just believe, but why we know, why it's factual, that the ANC will fall below 50% for the first time ever, because a majority of the citizens do not agree with the ANC, because the ANC hasn't solved the majority of problems in society. Nazispani is not working. Let's be frank.
Okay.
As ActionSA, we believe that we will create 4.8 million new jobs.
Here we.
And how are we going to do this? We're going to cut bureaucratic hurdles in getting those jobs. All those things that I mentioned, the inefficiencies with affirmative action, we're going to fix that. We're going to fix legislation that prohibits people from getting a job. We're going to amend the labor laws so that people are not exploited, but employers are not made to comply with regulations that are overly stringent as well.
Yes.
We're going to amend minimum wage laws so that people have the dignity of earning a decent wage, but again, that it's merit-based and people are earning what they deserve. And that's how you create new jobs. Also, I have to mention, currently South Africa sits on a very shaky fence where it doesn't know how to go about its international policy either. Well, as ActionSA will be very transactional in our international perspective, wherein we focus on foreign direct investment. Also, what we focus on is public-private partnerships, PPP, so that more jobs are created, the public sector is incentivized, and lastly, for university-eligible students who want to take a gap year at 18 years old, we offer a voluntary year of service so that they have the experience that they need when they do decide to get into the work field.
I'm going to go back to the part you mentioned where you touching base on we are going to have this economy of 4.8 million jobs. Most 2 years ago, or 3 or 5 years ago, we were promised 6 million jobs. I remember very well. And the people of Alex were promised 1 million houses. To this point, we have not seen that. And now, as we have seen, there is more retrenchments coming in and popping up out of people losing their jobs. Aren't you maybe not more realistic in your promise of jobs of 4.8 million, and also the labor, but the minimum wage that you spoke about? Will it be something similar to 12.5 as Marikana was requesting? Because it's a minimum wage. What merits are they going to qualify for one to get it if you say it's based on merits?
Look, Bafana, to answer your first question,
Yes.
4.8 million jobs is not only reasonable, but it will be done. Under an ActionSA government, 4.8 million new jobs will be created because scientifically we have the right policies, we've done the math, but most importantly, we are the right people. I mentioned Herman's track record.
Yeah.
You look at the jobs that are created in the city of Johannesburg during Herman Mashaba's tenure as mayor of Joburg. It's unprecedented. It's made him one of the best mayors of the city of Johannesburg. If you extrapolate that onto a national level, you can imagine how great South Africa will be doing in that field. You mentioned national minimum wage. Well, again, I say you don't want to discriminate against a person who wants a job, who's eager to have a job, but an employer can't afford them because they simply can't afford 3,500 rands for that. And so while we believe, as I say, that you should have a decent salary or income coming in.
Give me a number, Joosub. 6,000, 5,000. What are you looking at as a basic minimum wage under the ActionSA government?
ActionSA calls for there being a transactional approach between employers and employees, where both are satisfied and both can go about doing their business, where employees are able to access the job market, earn an income, and climb up the ladder. That's upward mobility, and that's what ActionSA offers.
I'm going to come to you on this issue. A lot of youth don't make it to university. Some, they are called unemployable, because maybe they don't have metric. There is a shortage of skills in this country. Do you have a plan for skills development? How do we upskill these young people to be employable and be economically active, rather than just having them as they're unemployable, they don't have metric? What is the ActionSA going to kind of assist those who might not necessarily fit into the system?
Right, absolutely. Well, if you don't have a matric, you are eligible to go to a TVET college where you can acquire those skills. But I want to touch on something very important. This is something that ActionSA has been developing over the last few months, but which has reached its conclusion just today. How do young people access higher education?
Yes.
Tertiary education, and not just any education, but quality education. The current government through NSFAS has failed in doing that.
Okay.
A young person who wants to go to university today finds themselves in a position where they can't. NSFAS can't afford them. NSFAS itself doesn't have money, and NSFAS is being badly mismanaged. The entire organization or entity is crumbling.
So would you support a free education model?
Here's what ActionSA would do. ActionSA, through its opportunity fund, would fund students who earn under a certain threshold, and I'll be more than prepared to give you a number there, who can go to university for free. And how this funding would work is through a partnership, a collaboration with the private sector, public sector, and students themselves.
Yes.
These are not student loans, essentially. This is students giving back to the opportunity fund so that one student who goes to university is able to assist another student to go to university by paying something into the opportunity fund after a 3-year period after they graduate, so that one hand helps another. If I go to university for free and I put something back into the opportunity fund, which already has money therein from the private sector, from the government, wherein NSFAS's money will be located.
But Ismail, isn't that similar to what NSFAS has been saying? To say most students are saying we can't afford to pay you back, because you are saying I'm going to graduate. You finance my education. Once I get a job, I must pay back to the system. Isn't that the basis of what NSFAS was? We give you money, you pay back, we take the next one to school. Isn't that the same thing?
Well, I haven't told you the figures yet. NSFAS currently funds students up to 350,000 rands a month.
Okay.
Who earn less than 350,000 rands a month. If that's your total monthly household income,
Yes.
yearly household income, then you are eligible for NSFAS. Ours is 500,000. Just by doing that, we increase the number of students going to university by a lot. And not just that, students who go to university will not be overburdened because they're not paying such a substantial amount of their fees back because of the intervention by the private sector and by the government. In essence, we give them the opportunity through the Opportunity Fund, not just to go to university and study and get a job, and they only have to pay back after 3 years. There's a 10-year cap on that, wherein if 10 years elapse and they haven't paid back anything to the Opportunity Fund, it's forgiven, it's waived. But most importantly, it makes the Opportunity Fund sustainable so that other students are able to go to university, thereby creating a more educated society, a more employable workforce,
Yes.
and very importantly, growing, boosting, putting the economy on turbocharge.
Yusuf, what you see as well, and Hemen was one of the people who was called xenophobic a couple of years ago, where he spoke about illegal immigration and how most people should be deported to their countries. Does ActionSA still stand by deportation of illegal immigrants?
Bafana, the simple answer to this is that ActionSA wants everyone to come to South Africa. South Africa is a beautiful country, and we welcome anyone who wants to come to South Africa to come to South Africa.
Yes.
But please, come through the front door. Anyone who is here illegally must go back. No country in the world who respects its own territorial sovereignty will allow anyone else to impose upon its borders. That's where we stand. But we also recognize that there are certain individuals who flee countries as refugees. And for those, we allow them as asylums to be in South Africa. But we know that if you go into your inner cities in Johannesburg, most of those people are not refugees. They have preyed upon a society in South Africa that doesn't have borders, because we don't currently have an active border in South Africa. You can argue with me the opposite, but if you go to any one of our borders, you can simply walk through. We don't have borders, and I don't think that should be the case. These people come into our country. Most of them are complicit in crime, are here illegally, are here not contributing to society, don't pay taxes, and those people who are here illegally should return to their country of origin.
The counter argument would be that maybe their home affairs is the problem because certain people are here, then their permits get they expire, and also when they have to go through the front door. There's a corruption as well at the borders that is rapid. So, what would be the best way to deal with border control? Are we going to impose? Are we going to deploy soldiers to the borders? How are you going to control the borders?
Well, you've got to better resource the Border Management Authority, which has been completely neglected by the current government. You capacitate them with what they need to manage South Africa's borders. But that works hand in hand with the DHA, the Department of Home Affairs, which itself has been completely rotten from the ground up. I don't know of any single Department of Home Affairs office that is not inefficient. I mean, if you go there simply to ask for a new ID or update any of your documents, you as a South African citizen find it difficult. And so, of course, if you're here as an immigrant or if you're fleeing from a country and you're a refugee, you are going to be in quite a difficult situation. And so we've got to make sure that the Department of Home Affairs is running in a more efficient way. And how do we do that is by getting the right people in there and introducing new methods, again, in line with international best practices, moving the system, integrating it to a more online or digital-based system so it's more efficient, and altogether making that the system works.
I'm gonna go into this question. We are known as the safe haven for crime in Africa or around the world. The rule of law in this country is very much lax. You are someone who's been dealing with law for a very long time. What would you recommend as a solution to to kind of reinforce the law, or if the word to use, to bring back the rule of law in our nation? What would you say is the best way to do it?
South Africa currently is one of the crime capitals of the world.
Yeah.
It's sad to say. And it has become a safe haven for criminals.
Yes.
But Bafana, that's why we need borders. That's why we need stronger borders, just to touch on what you asked me previously. Law and order is one of the preeminent principles of any society.
Yes.
If you don't have law and order in a society, you risk not having a society at all. So we've got to capacitate our police. Now, to do that, we pledge recruitment drives to get more boots on the ground so that there's a heightened attention given to crime. We stop crime. But Bafana, I think it doesn't just stop there.
So do
I think we shouldn't just be we shouldn't just be proactive, but we've got to set an example and be preventative as well. The judicial system will have to be overhauled in its sense as well, where currently you find, or the criminal justice system has to be reformed in the sense that life in prison means life in prison. Criminals go to jail simply because the jails in South Africa offer them even more freedom than the streets, where they go to jail and live a more luxurious life than they had even in the streets.
Yes.
Here in South Africa, under an ActionSA government, if you commit a heinous crime, you are going to jail. We throw away the keys.
That's it. Bring in a tougher law. Ensure that those who do the crime, they do the time.
Absolutely. And by doing that, you set an example to the rest of society. You put more boots on the ground by capacitating the police. You get the hawks, the scorpions back. You have specialized crime courts to deal with the intricacies of certain crimes in society.
But then, listen, if you bring back, don't you have confidence in the current units that we have? Do you think they're not more efficient? Do you think maybe we should strengthen them than to kind of have a lot of duplication of duties?
But these are not duplications of duties. Each will be tasked with a different function, and each are independent of each other. Currently, the police that we have, in certain instances, are complicit in crime themselves. We need to make sure that our police members are merit-based, are selected on merit. And importantly, we need to make sure that the word goes out that crime will not be tolerated in South Africa.
Because most people have this idea that maybe we should increase more policing. Maybe we should introduce maybe more harsher sentences to curb this. Certain countries have what you call hang pal, where they execute criminals. In South Africa, there is a way where we say that we rehabilitate the criminal,
Right.
But I don't think rehabilitation goes that far. So how do we rehabilitate criminals under the ActionSA?
I want to touch on this because ActionSA has long been touted for being a party that supported a death penalty. And so I'd like to just thrash that out. Our policy conference brought all of us together in unison to decide on the policies that ActionSA will be adopting, not if, but when it becomes the ruling party in South Africa.
Yeah.
And we decided exactly as you said, that we need harsher sanctions. In other words, harsher punishment for criminals who commit the most heinous crimes in society.
Yes.
And when you commit those most heinous crimes in society, you have to ask yourself, does rehabilitation work here, or is this person simply too dangerous to be let out into society? Now, when you commit a rape or when you commit a murder and you're sentenced to 20 years in prison, the criminal justice system has determined that 20 years would be a reasonable time for you to be rehabilitated, if you were to be rehabilitated. But we find currently that those sentenced to 20 years in prison are out in a much shorter time under parole and go on and commit more crime in the streets.
I'm going to go into this one here, my brother. There is a rumor on the streets. It's not me. They are saying that you are a faction of the DA. you are basically DA light. And maybe clarify this rumor. What makes you different from the DA?
Well, we're not the DA light. I say again, we're not the DA light. And I can even say the third time, we're not the DA light because we get asked that a lot. We're very different from the DA. People say we're the ANC light. People say we EFF light. I don't know where they get it from because we have our own unique perspective. We differ from the DA fundamentally in some instances, and we agree with the DA in some instances. But there's one thing for sure. ActionSA has its own unique brand, its own unique identity, its own unique force of people who are working to make South Africa a better place day in and day out. And most importantly, we may be called DA light, we may be called the ANC light, but when you elect an ActionSA government, you will see the difference on the ground, in the streets, as you mentioned,
Yes.
than the current ANC government that's currently in place.
I think maybe that rumor stems from the idea that it was the DA, Action SA. Most of its members were members of the DA, which were called the Black Caucus, and you have emerged now as this inclusive voice, but very much similar policies with the DA, just with different leaders. Which you agree?
No, it's not the same policies with different leaders. And not all of our policies are similar either. We divert in our policies, in some cases, very much from the DA. I think the reason that rumor has been touted is because of the fact that our president was a former DA member.
Yes.
But you have, if I'm not mistaken, you have former DA members who have their own political parties.
Yeah, like Musi Maimane.
Musi Maimani's got Bosa. We have another Bongani Baloyi who's got his own political party. And yes, we do have some members who were previously part of the DA in our party, like one of the foremost leaders of our party, Athol Trollop. But then we have leaders who are in the ANC in our party. We have leaders from the EFF who once sympathized with EFF who are in ActionSA and who looked at the DA and who looked at the EFF and who looked at the ANC and who said, no, these parties simply aren't the solution for South Africa. And that's why they've come together, worked together, despite their different races, different political beliefs, different backgrounds, different experiences in ActionSA. Bringing their ideas together. You might take some good ideas from this. You might take some good ideas from somewhere else. But ultimately, you forge your own brand, your own identity, because you've got to put the people first. You've got to put the people of South Africa first. No matter where you come from, you work on behalf of the people.
I'm going to ask you one question that is not usually asked, especially to, I'm sure Herman has had this before, the land issue. It's an issue that most people don't think it's maybe pressing. But then we see that with parties like the EFF, they have managed to go into parliament by promising land. Even the ruling party has been doing that with consultations across the country of Section 25. Where does ActionSA stands on land?
You know, this is a big issue, land reform.
Yeah.
And so ActionSA primarily is against this whole idea of expropriation without compensation. Well, firstly, I'd like to talk about expropriation without compensation, because if you're going to be talking about land, and if land reform, as I've heard with most parties, encompasses simply taking away land and putting it into the hands of either the state or the people themselves, then you've got to deal with what does the law currently say. Because some parties make promises and then they find out later that their promises can't even be enacted because it's not in line with the Constitution. We have to look at the Constitution as our principal source, our supreme source of law. The Constitution currently makes provision for expropriation with compensation.
Yes.
And ActionSA, being a party that's dedicated to upholding the Constitution, believes in that. But we also believe that land reform is something that can't be shrugged off because there's a real issue at hand here. People previously disadvantaged, displaced from land, seek better opportunities in life through land restitution.
Yes.
And how do we do that? Well, we offer something called a land tenure, where people will be given land to lease on and that's unused land that belongs to the state. For a period of 5 years, where thereafter they'd have the option to purchase that land. And we believe that in doing this, you also encourage skill development because very often you'd find that people want land, but skills in cultivating that land are missing. I say again that we are against expropriation without compensation because remember, that's currently not only unconstitutional, but the bill for that hasn't been passed yet, nor will it be passed because of its unconstitutionality.
I have the counter argument from your ANC and your EFF would be that, but the land was taken without compensation. No one bought those lands. The people were repossessed out of those lands, and it's only fair that you bring it back the similar way.
Yeah, but Bafana, you have to realize that you have to, if what we're talking about is equality, this is what we're talking about. Because you're talking about putting certain people in society who are not on the same level as others on that same level. So bringing everybody back to the same level, in other words, achieving equality. And when you want to achieve equality, you have to not just take from one and give to the other in a completely arbitrary way. If you're going to achieve equality, it has to be substantive equality. It has to be equality that's provided for in the Constitution. But most importantly, and now this is to answer your question, if you're going to be benefiting one person in society, it cannot be to the disadvantage of anyone else in society.
And I think that is the argument whereby the minority owns a chunk of land, the majority don't have land. And the land then right now only empowers the minority. Meanwhile, the black majority, the colored majority, or the colored minority as well, don't have access to land. So that's why they're saying that the land was taken through force, repossession taken from the people, and why should they pay it now to get it back?
Yeah, but remember, most of the land in South Africa is owned by the state anyway. What's stopping the state from allowing access to that land for previously disadvantaged groups? So I don't think it's really necessary to go into a private person's plot of land, take it away from them, put it in the hands of the government, who currently you can't even trust as a conduit to transfer the land to the people who need it, and then give it to people who aren't adequately even trained to cultivate that land. If the government has land that's untapped, that's unused, what the government should do, firstly, is capacitate society with the skills they need to cultivate that land, and then allow people to use that land, and ultimately to own that land, to take up their rightful ownership of that land.
I think maybe most, maybe I'll call them liberation ideologies, have always been on the view that if you get the land back, then we address the issues. And I must support the fact that yes, you are right. A lot of things that we managed to get out of the struggle, your SOEs, they're literally going down. Your municipalities, a similar thing. So clearly there is a lack of leadership. And you also feel that maybe there is a lack of cooperation with private sector and government to lift the millions of people out of poverty.
Yes, absolutely. And so the problem really is the centralization of power into the hands of the government. Centralization of power means when you take all of the power, in other words, SOEs, some of which control your electricity supply, some of which control your water supply, some of which control your transport, and you give all of that power to the government. But you don't have ethical leadership in government. What do you expect is going to happen? We as ActionSA call for the decentralization of power. And I want to give you an example of this. Let's look at Eskom. Let's look at load shedding. Eskom is a state-owned enterprise. It's operating as a monopoly in the energy market currently.
Yes.
And as an SOE, it's completely under the control of the government.
Yes.
But because government is corrupt, because government doesn't have ethical leadership, we see that in Eskom as well. We see Eskom now being run by construction mafia. And who is disadvantaged and who is suffering in the process? It's the people, it's kids who are studying under the candlelight. But if you decentralize power and you allow private sector to lend a hand as well, private individuals to lend a hand as well, and using the Eskom example, if you allow independent power producers to come in and create a more market-friendly, competitive economy, government, if it's corrupt, which under an ActionSA government it won't be, you still have different options at the table.
I think that the fear of most people is that once we give Eskom over to private sector and allow your IPPs to come in, we might experience maybe more prices for electricity. It might go higher. Maybe it's better under government, but maybe if it goes to private hands, it might go even way higher.
No, I disagree, and it's not giving ESCOM over
because it's based on profit and not the
true.
service.
But it's not giving ESCOM over to the private sector. You can still have ESCOM there as a player in the market, just as you have Telkom as a player in the telecommunications market. But you allow for Vodacom and MTN and Cell C. And because it's a competitive market, you will not have any one group pushing prices up, accelerating prices at an uncontrolled rate. The market would control prices. And I think you might just Bafana have the opposite. Prices won't go up, prices will come down.
There'll be competition,
Absolutely. If I don't like the price of data on Vodacom, I move over to Cell C, who are striving every day to bring the price of data down. And you'd have the same with the energy market.
ActionSA is in municipalities. I know in Nelson Mandela Bay, you are in coalitions with the DA, but also you are in a coalition here in Johannesburg as well. Do you see a future where coalition might be the solution for South Africa?
There is no way to avoid coalitions in South Africa.
Is that a solution?
Every proportional representation system of parliament has to eventually culminate in a coalition. Because no one party can have a majority or dominance over your political system forever.
I think most people are just worried, Joosub, that you have, Ismail, that we have a problem now where you guys end up fighting amongst yourselves, and that affects service delivery. And I mean, look at Johannesburg right now. We have had probably 2 or 3 mayors within the space of 2 to 3 years. There is much with coalitions. Your political squabbles, they affect the general service delivery that is due to the people. So that's when the fear is: are we ready as a country to embrace coalition as a solution?
You know the thing with coalitions, and I have to mention here that we as ActionSA are part of the multi-party charter. In coalition with a whole host of other political parties. And the multi-party charter works. And let me tell you why. Yes, we share the same values. Yes, many of our policies are similar. Not the same, but similar in certain ways. And we have many disagreements. But I think the one thing, the one objective, the one goal, the ultimate realization, the ideal that we all agree on is unseating the ANC. So when you talk about coalitions not working, coalitions would only work if there's one political party who makes the coalition ungovernable for the other party that it's supposed to coalesce with.
Yes.
But as ActionSA, we have identified a few parties that we're willing to work with. I don't think we'll ever enter into a coalition with the ANC simply because of the fact that the ANC is one of those political parties whose values we do not trust. Because they haven't proven themselves to be trustworthy.
So basically, you rather deal with your DA, deal with your Freedom Front Plus, PA, Patriotic Alliance, and others, but accept your EFF, your ANC, your liberation kind of style politics.
Well, you know, it's not that we would rather, but it's that we currently do. As I say, we are in the multi-party charter with the IFP, with the DA, and we've been in coalition with other parties as well who aren't in the MPC. And in those coalitions, it's worked where ActionSA was. It hasn't fallen apart. The state of rot in Johannesburg only festered when? After 2019. Which coincidentally is also after?
Mohamed Mashaba stepped down.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up with this. As a young person, Ismail, why should I be voting for ActionSA?
You should be voting for ActionSA because ActionSA is currently the only political party that will make you, as a young person, live up to the potential that you can live up to. Every other political party in South Africa will promise you something, but not give you anything at all. The ANC promises you education through NSFAS. It can't provide that. Other political parties promise you land. They don't have real plans. ActionSA has in its manifesto an objective, scientific approach put together by experts since the People's Dialogue in 2020 that would make it possible for young people to live out their realizations, that would create a more inclusive society through new policies like IEE, that would create more opportunity for all sectors of society through the Opportunity Fund, but most importantly, would bring South Africa up to the level in the world where it should be.
Definitely. That was Ismail Joosub. He is the youngest voice in the ActionSA. He's also heading to Parliament. Did he win your vote? Would you be voting for ActionSA in the upcoming election on the 29th of May? You make that choice. Please do engage with us on our podcast page. It is Podcast Party. Click like on the page, subscribe, and also as well share the content. This was Manifesto Unpacked, proudly brought to you by Podcast Party. Tune in, turn up, and take action. Let's meet same time, same place. I am Bafana Modise. Ciao, ciao.